After Java 8, interfaces can have default and static methods. How do we do this and how are they different? When we spoke about interfaces in the previous video, there was a point here that says we can only have method signatures in an interface that was prior to Java 8, but you can also have default methods, which are methods with default implementation, and static methods, which are methods that belong to the interface and can be called without creating an instance of the interface. And then we showed an example of the first one, which where we created a method signature only. And then for the second part, for default and static methods, we said a separate video will be made to demonstrate default and static methods. And here we are doing that. So I'm just going to put a comment here saying this is a method signature without implementation. Here, we're going to have default method, and we're also going to have a static method. Bear with me while I learn how to spell. All right. So let's just say that after we built our interface and now this is what our package explorer is looking like, then let's just say you decide later on that you want to do another sort of add another method signature. Let's just say void do action, just something like this. There's some very generic. As soon as I save, all of these classes that have implemented my action class is gonna have errors. And that's because to actually implement the interface, a class that's going to be concrete needs to implement all of the abstract classes. And we've agreed that all the methods in the interface are actually abstract. That's what we said here. It's implicitly public and abstract. So that's where default methods come in and play a good role. So this is when you want to use default methods. So instead of saying void, you want, sorry, before void is the return type, but right before that, you want to use the keyword default. Okay. As soon as we created or added the word default, now we have the errors are all gone when I saved my interface. But then we have another problem here that says you need to have a body instead of a semicolon. So here is what we mean by having a method with default implementation. So this is just something that you want all of the classes that implement this interface will have this default implementation. But if they wanted to sort of have their own version, they can override it. And I'll show you how that's going to be done. So default action performed. I'm just going to write some general words there. And now when we implement the the action class in the cat class, sorry, I'll say this again. When we implement the action interface in the cat class, we have the choice whether or not we want to override that default method. So here we can do that using the annotation. This is a good practice. And here we'll use public. You won't say default because it's default in the interface, and use the same name as your method. Now we can have some sort of a different implementation. Must override, so what, oh, it's called do action. Oh, okay. I call it default action. It makes more sense. Yeah. So now we have, get name. Differently. Okay. And to call this method, so here we will say cat1 dot default action. So that's how it's called. And when we run it, we get, sorry, it's here. The WizKids performs the default action differently. Let's see what happens if we don't implement it in the dog class and in the vehicle class. So here we get the default action is performed. This is called twice. One is coming from the dog class and one is coming from the vehicle class. All right, so that's what it is for default methods. It gives you that flexibility of adding a method with a default implementation in the interface without affecting the other classes that have already implemented their abstract methods in there. And then you also get that option of creating your own version in the implementing class and or choosing not to. So here we've chosen not to implement or override the default action, but rather have just called the default one that's coming in. So this is coming from the cat class. This is coming from the action interface. All right, now what we want to do is talk about the static methods. Now, it's the second part of our video and static methods. So let's look at that. Let's just scroll slightly up to see what static methods are. They are methods that belong to the interface and can be called without creating an instance of the interface. So to create the static method, we use the keyword static and void. Here I'm just going to give it static action, kind of relevant to the name. So here I've given it the name default action, just to indicate that I'm calling the default, whereas here. But yeah, I mean, obviously you would give more meaningful names when you're working in for your own project, but for explaining purposes, this is there to make it more clear. Performed, static action performed. Now, the static method can be directly called from the interface. Using the name of the class because it's not using the instance. And then, sorry, I've called the wrong thing. Static action. Right, now when we run it, we have static action performed. Now, just keep in mind, one of differences, so here we said, how are they different? This one you can use to call using the instance, whereas this one belongs to the class, not to the instance. The other thing is you can override these, however, you cannot override these. Can be overridden. I don't know how to spell overridden. How do you term action? It's not correctly spelled. Oh, double D. All right. It's good to learn. All right, so let's go back to the cat class and I'm going to try and see what happens if I try to override the static method. So public void static action. Let's see what we get. Oh, let me first do it correctly. So here the method static action of the cat must override or implement a super. So it's not really identifying this in the base class or in the interface. Sorry, the implemented interface or the interface it's implementing, because the static methods in interfaces are associated with the interface itself. It is not known or not associated with the implementing classes, whether it was cat, vehicle, or dog. So they are meant to be called using the interface name in the same way that we've done here, and not through instances of implementing classes. So we have an error here because static methods are not inherited by implementing classes. Okay, so I'm just going to delete it So that's pretty much it for this video. I'm going to run this one more time to have the final output, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.